This is TWiT.
This episode of Tech Break is brought to you by ACI Learning. ACI Learning's courses are easy to navigate, and their structure is much more straightforward than traditional training programs. Try it for yourself, and then bring the whole team along. For individuals, use the code TWIT30 for 30% off a standard or premium individual IT Pro membership at go.acilearning.com/twit. Mark Gurman says, Apple's going kicking and screaming to Type-C. They are only doing it. Well, here's his headline from his Bloomberg newsletter. Apple is set to embrace an iPhone charger it didn't want.
Yeah. I thought that was super interesting because I imagined that, okay, they're going to have to, they're putting Type-C in everything. It's going to come to the iPhone at some point. His newsletter story is that they plan to simply wait out Lightning for the next 2, 3, 4 years until they're ready to release a completely portless phone, which has been rumored for a long time. It would be a stupid idea if it weren't for Apple, because they can couch a stupid idea in terms of courage and because we're going where the puck is going to be, not where the puck actually is. But I still, I know I'm talking about something that hasn't been announced, and if it happens, won't happen for another 3 or 4 years. But I'm a hard sell on the idea of this being in any way a move that's going to improve anything for users. That's like,
it seems a little petulant of Apple to say. In fact, Gurman's phrasing is a little weird. The company has an ironclad rule when it's introducing a new product or dealing with the media. It always wants to operate from a position of strength.
No kidding. That's called marketing. That's PR. Good. Yeah. I don't love this report. I'm deeply skeptical of it, actually. I'm sure there are people inside Apple who don't like the fact that this was mandated. And I know that Mark has reported before about this dream that Apple has of the portless iPhone, which I've always thought was kind of BS, or at the very least a kind of fantasy that would be eventually down the road a long time. I don't have his sources. I just am really skeptical that when he refers to Apple's strategy monolithically, I don't believe it. I'm sure people were against it or were arguing just to hold out for this magical future where there was a portless iPhone, which I'm very skeptical of. But my feeling is if it hadn't gone so badly 11 years ago, this would have happened way sooner. And
11 years ago was when Lightning came out.
By the Lightning transition, exactly, that they're like, no, I don't want to go through that again. And with this EU thing, they basically are forced to do it. But, I don't know. I think that Apple does have a dream of going quote unquote portless, but even then I think it's probably a magnetic connector like MagSafe with some data pins on it that are actually like a smart connector on an iPad. I'm really skeptical of a completely walled off phone that you can't plug a plug into. So when I hear a story like this that builds on that and then says they're very offended that they had to do this, they were waiting for that promised land in the future, it's like I don't buy it. I think it's more likely that they would have gone sooner if they didn't feel like they know what's coming, right? Which is there's going to be all those stories about, Apple is ruined, just wants to make money and they made me change all my cables out. And like those stories are coming because they're inevitable. They'll be all over the place.
I think it's less about them. I guess I don't really believe that they're kicking and streaming either. I think that they just didn't want to spend any time on it because they know that they're going to get rid of it. So they were kind of like, why go through a transition that's only going to last 3 or 4 years if they think that they're going to go down that path. And I do agree that most likely anything that had got rid of the port would probably have data pins or the ability to pass data over that. I think the hard part for them is that going from Lightning to transfer speeds that you might get through a non-port is probably pretty equal. You could probably make that data work. Going through USB-C is harder, because USB-C has such a much higher, or even if they went to Thunderbolt, has just a much higher transfer rate. So you get used to that. And I think that the Ultras, potentially maybe only the Ultras, but the Ultras and the Pro Maxes would be the ones that would probably always have USB-C. And I think that they might have been always going that way because if you're going to start recording ProRes, you really need USB-C. Yeah. You can't keep on building up this idea of ProRes or ProRes RAW or any of those things and still use the kind of connectors we have right now. So I think that it was kind of coming either way.
Yep.
In that area.
I mean, I'm with you, Jason, in that I don't think that if this is a real thing, that they were ever going to do something where there was absolutely no way to send to send electrons from an outside source directly inside the thing. There's always going to be something like pogo pins, but even that, I think that's just a stupid, arrogant, dogmatic idea. I mean, the thing is, like, I don't know. It's going to be fascinating. The engineering underneath creating an iPhone with no holes in it pales in comparison with the 3, 4, 5 years that they're going to need to engineer the excuses that they're going to present during the rollout event about why this is such a great idea and why this is a consumer forward, consumer friendly approach, when actually it's nothing but downside for the consumer. It's like I think the only thing that's obvious is that they say, oh well, gosh, the dust incursion and moisture incursion, it'll increase the longevity of the phone. And say, well, you're already IP68 resistant. What are you going to be, like IP70, IP73, IP74? That those things don't exist. And it's not like you're saying, oh well, because we're making this thing so much more durable, congratulations, we're going to make, like, if it gets dunked in water and needs to be fixed, that's covered in Apple Care from now on. No, they're not going to do that. This is going to be their case where they made a decision that made the iPhone easier for them to manufacture, that makes it more interesting as a project for them, but once again creates a situation in which they're taking they're taking a means of connection that always works. It's you take a cable here, you plug it into there, electrons go from there to there, it always works, to a system where it will work if the following set of conditions is met. And that's such a huge downgrade for consumers that people should be, again, I can't imagine them pulling this off in a way that I'm not going to be making fun of them for this.
And it's slow and inefficient. I mean, that's the other thing, is even if you can just charge wirelessly via a puck, it generates a lot of waste heat, right? Which sometimes, depending on your environment, might actually make the phone stop charging because it gets too hot. It is slow compared to the cable. I use MagSafe most of the time, but like I just have a hard time picturing that. And Alex's point is a good one. I could see a scenario where maybe they wanted to play out the string with Lightning on, you could maybe do it on the low end phone, but he's absolutely right. It's already ridiculous that they've got this video capability and that just huge video files. And then they're like, well, good luck with Lightning. Slow. And so to have the USB-C connector, which is everybody's familiar with it. I don't know. I'm fascinated by the way Mark has reported this, but I'm not sure I buy that. I'm sure there are people who felt this way inside Apple, but is that like the monolithic Apple response here? I'm dubious of that.
I don't know if there is a monolithic response.
No,
Apple.
There can't be.
I think that we think that there is, and we think that Apple is Apple. But, I've met a lot of folks at Apple, and they all have pretty strong opinions, and they're not necessarily monolithic, about how. So it depends on who you're talking to with any of these things as to what what we are going to do, kind of thing. Unless you are Tim Cook and a handful of other people, you really don't know.
In fact, you could argue that the way Mark's story is written is that his sources are people who lost the argument, right?
Right.
Where there are people inside Apple who are like, no, USB-C is good. And they were fighting back and forth. No, let's just keep Lightning until we get to portless. And like, no, we should switch to USB-C. And then at some point they decided to switch to USB-C. Maybe whether it was prodded by the EU or not, doesn't really matter. Those people could easily be the ones who are feeding Mark Gurman their story about how we weren't going to do this, even if some of them were.
And again, I think that the reality is it was always going to go to USB-C for the Ultra and the Pro Max, most likely. Definitely the Ultra, maybe the Pro Max. So that was always going to happen, because you just can't do what you need to do with those if they keep on selling those phones.
Speed of transfer.
Yeah, and so the main thing is what we're going to do with the less expensive phones. And the other thing that they will probably bring up that I think is so far valid, just because it's the only way people are getting in. The only way people are hacking phones is physical access to that port. The only way they can get into the iPhone is a physical access to that port. Taking that port away makes it considerably harder to hack an iPhone. Like as far as like closing gates and welding them shut, getting rid of that port is a big piece of Apple being able to make sure that it's impenetrable as they move forward.
Yeah, but now we're talking about like from my understanding, a very small increase in the security and integrity of people exfiltrating information off a device they have physical possession of. And is that going to be a better upside for most people than, oh, I'm totally screwed, I don't have a cable with me, I don't have a special Pogo cable with me to charge my phone with, and woe is me, I didn't happen to bring in my laptop bag a wireless charging device, or I decided that I just think that the massive inconvenience that's going to happen, that there are going to be plenty of people who are going to be like, hey, no, it's great. I needed to buy a new USB battery bank anyway. My new battery bank just simply has a Qi charging in addition to all the other stuff. Let's even ignore everything that Jason was saying about how it's inefficient, it's slow, it generates heat in your bag, all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, but what if I don't want to I like my battery bank. I don't need to spend $50, $60, $70 on a new battery bank. I was really excited about the fact that I could now reuse all of the USB-C stuff that I use for literally everything else I have that has a digital pulse. It's I don't know. I have a hard time coming away from the idea that this is just dogmatic arrogance. If this is something that Apple actually wants.
Notably, Mark doesn't say my sources or according to people in the know.
It's a newsletter.
Yeah. It's very pundity. The whole piece is pretty pundity.
I have to say he's gotten a little bit fast and loose. Like, I know Bloomberg has rules, but he doesn't seem to be following any of the rules here.
I think when he's reporting, he's solid and he follows the rules. But I think that there is just as an observer of his work from the outside, I think Bloomberg also wants him to do some punditing, especially in the newsletter, which is where he breaks news. But he also is recapping old stories of his, which is sort of what he's doing this time as a way to set the table for the iPhone. And his punditry. I mean, look, I'm not going to judge somebody else's punditry. It's fine, but it's not his reporting. And I think his reporting is solid. So that's the challenge there of him being in the Bloomberg environment, which is a different editorial environment than when he was at 9 to 5 Mac back in the day. And they have their own quirky rules and all of that. But yeah, some of it, when he is specific, I think you can see his diligence. But there are other times where he is pulling back and telling a story. And that's when I start to say, like, well, but who? Like, who said that?
This feels like that story. Yeah. Based on years of reporting about these kinds of things, he says it'll be a PR debacle. But I'm with you, Andy. I can't wait. I think finally I get rid of the last little bit of Lightning non-Type-C charging. I mean,
I think some regular people are going to be unhappy with it for various reasons, but I just think it's going to blow over.
Well, and I think I can't possibly imagine that there's always going to be people that are going to be upset with any change that gets made. However, I can't imagine this isn't where Apple is taking. Hey, the news story is we decided to do away with a completely proprietary standard that only we support, and we're embracing the thing that you likely already have stuff that already works. We're not telling you wasn't like the transition to Lightning where we're saying all of your old stuff doesn't work. You're going to need to buy absolutely brand new stuff, and you can only buy it from us or from people who have gone through a special Works with iPhone program with us. This is basically making sure that all of your stuff is more democratic, more Catholic, more ecumenical, all that sort of stuff. And people are going to complain, but I don't think this is as valid a complaint as it would be like when people were saying that, hey, suddenly all my favorite headphones don't work with my iPhone anymore unless I buy a $30 adapter and remember to bring it with me whenever I go.
Yeah, I think that it's I think that the fact that it took so long to go to USB-C, most of us I have probably 40 USB-C of different lengths next to me over here on my desk.
I have two sitting in my car that I forgot.
The biggest problem I have is that I have like all these wires that come from my car to plug into things and everything else. And I have a wireless charger in my car, wireless charger here, and I have to admit that I've gotten kind of used to that. But the main thing is that I think that if they had done it 2 or 3 years ago, I would have been frustrated because I wouldn't have a lot of USB-C or as much as I do now. Now it's the one outlier. Like it's the one thing that I have that is using something other than Thunderbolt or USB-C. As far as made for iPhone, it'll be interesting to see. I think it'll charge that way. I think devices will be different because I have noticed that there's something about 17 that is kind of closing off access to video out of my phone. So it's like they're something's afoot. Like they're going, I don't identify what you're talking to, and I'm not sure if I'm going to do anything with that. And so it's an interesting, something's changing in the way that they use that port, even though it's Lightning. I feel like there's something, they're working on something, but I don't know what it is.